Welcome to a brand new episode of Part of the Problem. Oh, do we have a good one for you today? Very quickly, before we get started, I do just want to remind everybody, as I made the announcement last week, my amazing wife has written a children's book, which is beautiful and so sweet. It's called Healthy Hibernation. And it was, because of you guys, it was like the #1 ranked children's health book. And it was up at the top of children's books. So we're both so happy for that. It is available for pre-sale right now on Amazon and also on bookbaby.com. And it will be there in time for the holidays if you get it now. It's the sweetest thing ever. Just a book about talking to kids about eating healthy in this world of being a young parent where, you know, there's a lot of poison out there, and that's a good conversation to get started. Okay, without further ado, there is literally no one I would rather have as a guest on the show today, and partially because there's basically no one I enjoy talking to more at all times, but particularly this week when there has been this massive coordinated cancellation attempt. I've seen this happen to other good friends of mine. I was right around when Joe Rogan was going through this kind of massive coordinated effort, but it did not feel nearly as vicious or at least as close to inciting violence as this one does. So, of course, we're welcoming to the show the great Tucker Carlson. How are you, sir?
Well, I couldn't be better. Thanks for having me, Dave.
Oh, yeah, of course. Anytime. Obviously, you have an open invite onto this show. So, a lot's gone on over the last week or so, and obviously it started. You had Nick Fuentes on your show. I had just had Nick Fuentes on my show a few weeks before that, but as has become custom, you have become my human shield once again, where all the outrage is generated toward you, but all the deaths are still my fault, as the human shield logic works. But so there was this huge show that you did with Nick Fuentes. Then Josh Hammer, as I covered on my last episode, wrote this incredibly disgusting and creepy piece for the Daily Mail about it. And then there was a big event, I believe it was Genocide Fest 2025, where the theme of the entire thing was that Tucker Carlson is not MAGA. And in fact, there were calls to cancel Tucker Carlson. And so I kind of want to go through all of this as best we can and respond to it. Let's start with the podcast that you did with Nick Fuentes, and maybe a little bit about the one I did with him as well, because I thought there were similarities between the two. And one of the things that I just find very interesting about this is that all of the neocon Zionists are insisting that you didn't see what you saw on that show, that something else happened, that what happened on this podcast was Tucker agreed with all things Nazism or something like that, when in fact, for anybody who did watch the show, what you actually heard was Tucker Carlson tell Nick Fuentes and the world that it is against his religion to hate Jewish people, or any group of people for that matter. And so it's just, there is something so, I don't know, it's just this crazy world we live in, but there's something so still to this day startling about watching someone go, my deeply held religious views are that I can't hate Jewish people. And then the response is, look, a Jew hater. So bizarre.
Well, right. And it scrambles the literal brain. And I am literal. I'm a writer, so I believe in words and their meaning. And I think they have nuance, but basically fixed meanings. And so to see someone lie or speak in a way that's dishonest, but totally unmoored from physical reality is always bewildering. And you're like, but no, that's not, I said the opposite. Right. And then you realize, of course, it's not about you or what you said. It's about something bigger. And there are a couple of things. I mean, the most obvious on a political level, this is a fight over what happens after Donald Trump. What does the Republican Party look like? Does it actually adopt an America first foreign policy as promised 10 years ago? Or does it maintain its neoconservative posture, which is very unpopular with the public and has borne no fruit? I mean, it's been a disaster on every level for the United States for, since 9/11, at least. But what happens after Trump goes? And that's what this is about. That's why they're vesting the energy in this. That's what the rage is about, because they don't want to lose control of foreign policy. I just can't say that enough. It's about foreign policy. They don't care about domestic policy because they don't care about the United States, but they do care about the U.S. Treasury and the Pentagon, the projection of force on behalf of Israel. And so that's what they're arguing about. And again, that's a very unpopular position with the public, which is why they don't say it out loud. My position has always been, I'm not ashamed of my views. I'm happy to talk about my views with anybody. I don't think I have any reason to be ashamed of my views. I think they're actually kind of moderate, honestly. They're different from the way things are operating now. And of course, I disagree with the direction the US government's taking in a whole bunch of different ways, but I don't think we should burn the US government down. My view, which I know is yours as well, is the US government should act on behalf of American citizens. America first. Doesn't mean a bellicose posture, doesn't mean you attack people. In fact, it probably means you attack fewer people and you shed less blood. You act on behalf of your citizens. They own the government. They pay for the government. It's in their name that all this is being conducted. So that's a really simple concept. It's the most powerful, resonant concept in American politics. It brought Trump the majority of the popular vote. And I believe it. I sincerely believe that. And most people do. They don't. So that's what this really is about. As for Fuentes himself, I thought a lot about it for many reasons. And for one, Nick had attacked my family, my father, my wife, one of my children by name, a lot. And so it's hard. It was hard for me to get over that, For another, as I've said a million times, I thought he was a Fed. And I thought this was part of, an op designed to tar sane, anti-neocon, pro-realist foreign policy people like you and me and Glenn Greenwald and Sachs and, normal people tar us as Nazis. I did suspect that. I don't know if that's true or not. I raised that with him. But basically, in the end, I decided Nick Fuentes can't be canceled. They've been trying since he was a freshman in college. It doesn't work. In fact, he's gotten bigger. He is enormously talented. Anyone who denies that is lying. And he has a not fully coherent, but a semi-coherent kind of position. And I would like to hear what it is, because that's kind of my job. And I'm also interested because he's the most influential voice for men under 30 in the United States. More influential than me, more influential than you. I don't think there's any question about that. Yeah. I spent a lot of time thinking about this and talking to a lot of people about it. And I think that is true. So it's not like I didn't make Nick Fuentes, hardly. I just want to know what this is about. And I wanted to make the point that I often make and now seems even more important than it ever has, which is that virtue and sin are not transmitted genetically.
Right.
There is no such thing as blood guilt. Therefore, collective punishment is always immoral. God created each person individually. He did not create communities at once. He created people, and all of us will die and in the end face God alone. So it's about the person. And people can be changed by God, by the way. And the New Testament is that story of people who were, in the case of the whole hero of the New Testament, the human hero is a guy called Paul, who was murdering Christians as a Pharisee, and then becomes the greatest proselytizer in the history of Christianity and my personal hero. So don't tell me that people can't be changed because of their blood. Now, that is the basis. That position is the basis of Western civilization. We often talk about Western civilization, and we're all defending Western civilization. Israel's defending Western civilization. Israel does not have a Western position on this question. The Israeli position, not of all Israelis, by the way, and certainly not of all Jews, but I'm saying of the Israeli government and of a couple of its ministers, which they say this out loud all the time, is that everybody who's related to a terrorist shares in his guilt. That's collective punishment. It is blood guilt, and it's antithetical to Christianity and to the West. And so for me, and by the way, Israel's not the only country that does this. Most countries do this. Literally, most countries do this. All of Asia, India. This is like an intuitive response that people have. Russia, we're going to punish the family too because they're related, of course. Only the West, and I mean specifically the Anglosphere, Western Europe, because their foundation is Christian, reject that explicitly. Our justice system is based on the individual. People who do good things are rewarded. People who do bad things are punished. It's about the individual because that's our religion. And so I just wanted to make that point, not because of Israel or Fuentes or anything, but because that idea right there, that specific idea, is the Western civilization we are struggling to defend. And its opponents are domestic. The neocons do not believe that at all. Clearly, they're attacking my family just like Nick Fuentes attacked my family. So I just wanted to say that. I want to say that in every venue because it's a feature of my religious faith, but it's also my inheritance as a Western man, as the product of Western civilization. And that's what I want to defend. Randy Fine does not believe that. Of course, Lindsey Graham does not believe that. Of course. So the idea that I hate Jews, obviously I don't hate Jews at all. Of course, obviously, it almost feels beneath me to say that, but it's the fact. But I'm not allowed to hate any person because of the group he's attached to. I reject. That's what identity politics is. It's the belief that people are either better or worse based on how they were born. And that is not a Western understanding of people or of God. And that's why identity politics doesn't sit right with most Americans, even though you could like make a case for it. We need to redress this past injustice or whatever. But most people sort of know that's unfair. Why is it unfair? It's unfair because it treats people as components of a larger whole, as part of a group whose individual choices make no difference. It's like, you're black, therefore you're a criminal, or you're Jewish, therefore you're bad. Like, that whole way of thinking is evil. It's anti-Christian. And that is the true attack on the West and on Western civilization. And so I hear people like, Randy, if I were defending Western civilization, oh, are you really? No. You're its main enemy. And so Black Lives Matter, its main enemy. And not because they're black or Jewish, or nothing to do with that, because the idea is wrong. So I just wanted to say that. I'm going to say that every day for the rest of my life. I will die for that belief. I mean it, because it's my religious belief, and it's also true.
All right, guys, let's take a moment and thank our sponsor for today's show, which is The Wellness Company. The Wellness Company is now introducing American-made ivermectin, safe, trusted, and produced right here in the United States. A lot of it's made in China, but the Wellness Company gets American-made ivermectin. It's been prescribed globally for more than 30 years and even earned the Nobel Prize in Medicine for its proven ability to eliminate parasites and support overall health. And new research also points to potential benefits for skin, immune system, and even cancer support. Most pharmacies charge $5 a tablet, but the Wellness Company is offering a higher 18 milligram dose for just $3.33. You'll get a 6-month supply designed for 4 21-day cleanse cycles, all at an unbeatable price. And you'll be supporting American medicine rather than China's supply chain. Go check them out at twc.health/problem and use the promo code problem to save $30 off plus free shipping. That's twc.health/problem, promo code problem for $30 off. All right, let's get back into the show. Yeah. And for somebody who's watched you, religiously, no pun intended, over the years, like I always watched your show on Fox News. It was, in fact, I used to talk about it on the show. It was at the end the only cable news show I watched. I couldn't even hate watch the other ones anymore. They just got too boring. I used to hate watch it. There was a good time where you could hate watch MSNBC and it was fun, but after a while, it just wasn't even fun anymore. You're just like, oh, Joe Scarborough's sad like this. But this was, as you covered the entire really rise and fall of insane wokeism over those years, this was always your view. You were consistent about this throughout the entire thing. And look, one of the things, and this is what I thought was kind of interesting about Nick Fuentes and why I had him on the show, and I assume part of the reason you did too, right? Is like you just said, look, the kid is enormous. He is humongous. I don't, by the way, when I say kid, I don't mean that to be like condescending. That's how 40-year-olds talk about 20-year-olds. But so he's enormously talented. He's enormously huge at this point. And then I had planned the episode with him before this, but after the murder of Charlie Kirk, he really went out of his way to like hit all the right notes. And and to really be kind and Christian and to condemn violence and like I appreciated that. We were at kind of we're still at a dangerous moment in American history. Tensions are very high. We just witnessed the biggest political assassination of my lifetime. And also, this is somebody, you knew him better than me, but like I was friends with the guy. It's a very jarring thing when this happens. And it's a very jarring thing. First off, you watch your friend get publicly executed. Second of all, he's kind of in the same line of work as you. Like this is like a time that's kind of scary. Like I have very little children. I'm not prepared to get killed yet. And so for somebody who's supposed to be the biggest voice in the most radical right wing pocket of America, for him to be calling for like Christianity and peace and condemning violence, I was like, hey, that's awesome. And okay, so there's a lot of other things he's said where he's really intentionally saying the most provocative, outlandish thing. And there's a whole lot of like humor and trolling that's kind of involved in it. Sometimes it's not exactly clear to say, like, wait, do you really mean that? Do you really mean the craziest thing you just said? But look, also, I remember being in my 20s there weren't smartphones and social media and podcasts back then, thank God. So I said a lot of wild shit in my 20s too, And so you almost go, okay, well, now you've found yourself in this situation where you're like bigger than you've ever been. And now you just watched your big political opponent get publicly executed in this horrible way. And now you're sitting down for conversations with me or conversations with Tucker, and we're kind of going like, hey, what do you really believe here, though? What do you really mean by this or that? And I am sorry, but anyone who objectively watched either one of those or both of those podcasts, it is just undeniably clear that me and you, this is just objectively true. Me and you did not move 1 inch on our views on what we've been saying the whole time. And in fact, look, when you said the thing to Fuentes about, hey, we're both Christians, like I went at it from more of a libertarian perspective and you from more of a Christian perspective, which makes sense. But I basically said to him at one point, like, you're telling me I say it's the Israel lobby and the Israeli government, but I'm not saying it's the Jews. Well, what do you mean? Let's talk about this. And he kind of conceded that, like, oh yeah, this doesn't apply to all Jews. And then when you said it to him, he kind of conceded, like, yes, I'm also a Christian who has that same worldview. And okay, so look, I'm not even saying, is Nick Fuentes moderating? I don't know exactly. Maybe he's just clarifying, but if there's anyone who is moderating, it was him. And if he is moderating at all, I think that's great. I think that'd be him doing the right thing. I would rather him come a little bit, in that direction. And again, what's kind of interesting to me about it, right, is that, look, I kind of tried a couple times during my podcast with him, as I think you saw it. And there were a couple times where I'd be like, hey, okay, well, we agree on this. Let's talk about this. Now let's talk about something where we don't agree. Let's get into this. At one point, I just brought up the Holocaust. Like, are you saying, do you really think the Holocaust didn't happen? Because, like, we could talk about that. Like, let's get into it. And not in a, like, I'm offended way, but like, no, let's actually talk about the history of it or whatever. And he didn't really want to argue about it. He was kind of like, yeah, no, I get your point. It probably did happen, Now, those clips aren't circulating. Now, all of these, now think about it, right? Think about the fact that the people who say they want to fight anti-Semitism so much, they aren't circulating the clips where Nick, on my podcast, explicitly rejected racial hatred. On your podcast, when he agreed with you that Christians can't believe in collective guilt. People don't want, Ben Shapiro's not clipping that for his show today for the greatest hits. No, they're going back to all the worst things he said. And I think this should tell all of us something. They actually prefer that. Well, they prefer that he be a neo-Nazi so that they can attach him to you, so that they can argue to cancel you and argue that you're not a part of this GOP coalition, rather than saying it'd be better if we at least left the door open for this guy to maybe reflect on some of this stuff and maybe reject some of the things that we find a little bit. Look, Nick Fuentes is never going to be a bitch. He's never going to go out here and beg for Ben Shapiro's forgiveness, which he never should, because who the hell is Ben Shapiro? But like, if he is maturing and he is clarifying or moderating, isn't it something that they all are allergic to that?
Of course. And in general, they're, what they fear, and not all, but can I say one thing? The thing that bothers me maybe most about torquing up the rhetoric to the point where you're calling people Nazis who aren't Nazis, very anti-Nazi, always have been, will continue to be. I will never become what they call me. That's part of the game, right. Of course, to make you into the hater they say you are. And I'm not going to do that. I pray about it every single day, and that's not going to happen to me. I will be cheerful until I die, no matter how I die. So there's that. But what's so interesting is they do not want just a straightforward conversation about what they believe. They do not. And so it's often I have heard, like, if I'm being totally honest, about a bird hunting trip for the last 2 days, like off grid, but I'm getting a lot of this all at once. People are mad at me. And apparently one of the criticisms is that I went in and spoke to Ted Cruz, and I was so tough on Ted Cruz, but I was so nice to Fuentes. And it's like, I'm just trying to think about the Ted Cruz interviews. I was actually very polite to Cruz. And I just wanted him to explain what he thought. And like, what is AIPAC and why is it okay to take all this money from them? And they're not a foreign lobby. And he immediately, and I mean immediately, called me an anti-Semite. And I really wasn't expecting. I've known Ted since long before he was a senator. I have very mixed feelings about him and his life, but I never thought he would call me an anti-Semite because I asked him about campaign contributions, but he did immediately. And he did because he didn't want to have that conversation rather than just saying, I mean, they're lobbying for the Israeli government. Maybe they should be registered. I would still accept their money if they're registered. Like, who cares? He wouldn't say that. He was like, shut up. He tried to end the conversation through a verbal attack. And Fuentes, whatever you think of him, hey, Fuentes, what do you think? He would just tell you. Now, people are choosing not to believe what he said. And it wasn't a perfect interview. I've never conducted a perfect interview. I felt pretty good about it, to be honest. But all these people are like, oh, you should have this shit on that. Well, interview him yourself. You're not my assignment editor. Do it yourself. There are a couple of things I do regret. I'll just say. He said, I love Stalin. I was like, so shocked by that as someone who spent his whole life studying Stalin. It's actually one of my true areas of personal interest, know a lot about the topic. How could you like Stalin, But I didn't get back to that.
Well, Tucker, I mean, at the very least, can't we count on the Jew haters to be good on Joseph Stalin? I mean, I would think that like it's like meeting a commie who was for the war in Iraq or something like that. Like, come on, we could at least count on you for that.
Weird to hear Ben Shapiro, because, of course, all the neocons are very exercised because I have said, and I sincerely believe, very anti-Hitler, very anti-Nazi, but Franklin Roosevelt and Winston Churchill supported Joseph Stalin, who created was the author of the greatest genocide against Christians ever in history. And we sent huge amounts of money, billions and billions and billions adjusted for inflation, to Joseph Stalin and war material. We were on Stalin's side during the war. And my view is, I'm not for that. I'm against Hitler. I'm against the Nazis. But when you get to a place where you're sending money to Stalin, I'm out. And they're like, oh, you're a Holocaust denier. What? What do you do with the Holocaust? I don't want to send money to Stalin. But they demand that you be happy that we sent money to Stalin, but now they're offended by Stalin. Whatever. I guess I should have said something. I just was so overwhelmed with other things. I didn't. But I just want to say at the outset, because this has been weighing on me, I did say something that I really regret saying that I didn't fully mean. I said it because I was mad, which is always when I say things I don't really mean. When I get pissed, my wife's always telling me this. I was snippy and I didn't explain it. And I said something to the effect of, I despise Christian Zionists. And I'm just sorry that I said that, because I don't. I'm mad at a certain kind of thinking. Some of the nicest people I know are Christian Zionists, actually. If you're in a car crash, they would save you. If you needed someone to watch your bank account, they wouldn't steal from you. They're like really good people and sweet people. I want to be very specific quickly about what I was talking about. In at least a couple of different occasions, the Israeli government bombed churches in Gaza and killed a bunch of Christians. And not an accident, of course. I mean, this is like a very high-tech military with precision. I mean, they, gave pagers with bombs in them to Hezbollah. So like this is a military, a national defense institution that understands what it's doing. They didn't accidentally bomb 2 churches and kill these Christians, and they never apologized for it. And so I brought this up with a couple of Christian leaders, and including the Speaker of the House, and said, like, what is, we're paying to bomb churches? Because we're paying for it. And the response I got from every single one was, the Bible commands us to support Israel. And I said, so Jesus is telling us that we need to get on board with murdering Christians? Is that what you're saying? And they basically were just like, shut up. And I found that extremely, as a Christian, extremely upsetting. And I've never kind of gotten over that. But I should have said that. That's what I was talking about specifically. We cannot support the murder of innocents. I don't care what the pretext is. That is not allowed in our religion. And if it is, then it's not my religion. That's not what the New Testament says at all. It's not even a close approximation of what it says. There's no justification for that in the New Testament, period. So I am distressed. I don't hate. I shouldn't have said despise, but I'm very distressed about that. And that's specifically what I was talking about. So I just want to apologize sincerely for not being clearer.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's reasonable. And look, we all kind of do this sometimes. And these, you're having conversations that aren't scripted. And I thought that, I know I saw everyone jumping on that, but it's like, well, look, clearly, and the thing that, of course, none of these guys will admit, but what was very obvious about what you were saying was that it was also, at least partially, in a defense of Jews. Like, you were going like, well, look, I mean, like, you're saying it's the Jews, but then explain George W. Bush and Dick Cheney and Mike Huckabee and like, oh, right. It's like
Grant and the whole thing. Yeah.
Right.
They're death worshipers. I'm not for that. I don't care what you claim your religion is. I'm not in favor of death worship.
Yes.
At all.
So, well, look. And I would also just add this quickly, because, and look, I'm no religious scholar, and I'm probably not a very good Jew by the religious standards. I am a God-fearing man, but I don't I don't do all the things you're supposed to do. But I do remember Chaim Weizmann, who had a great quote about the Zionists, the pre-Israeli Zionists who had embraced terrorism in order to drive the British out in the couple years preceding the creation of the State of Israel. And his line was that we cannot create a Jewish state by un-Jewish means. And he was very simply just even by Judaism. I mean, I don't know, like the 10 Commandments have a pretty clear one about murdering people. And those are the commandments that Jews are commanded to follow. And so I would personally say all of this stuff, this entire foreign policy is completely inconsistent with Christianity, and it's completely inconsistent with Judaism. And then just to the other point, which is part of, look, obviously in all of these things, and especially the dynamic, like we all know, which was with the Fuentes interview with both you and me in different ways, more so I think with you, because you guys had really been trading, like insults right before the thing. But there's a feeling out process there. You both don't know exactly, like trust is not exactly very high, and you go in and neither of you know completely what this is going to be. Like, for example, Nick could have decided to make the show with me very contentious, or I could have decided to make that show very contentious, and neither one of us knew whether the other one was going to necessarily do that at a certain point. Exactly. And so your point to Ted Cruz, he made it contentious when he was on with you. But then beyond that, the fact that people are even comparing the two things, you're like, at the time, we were launching a war, and a sitting United States senator was calling for regime change. This was the background of your conversation with Ted Cruz. Whereas with Nick Fuentes, you're talking to a 26-year-old streamer who's said a lot of provocative, edgy, and say fucked up things in the past. Those are just kind of different dynamics, man. Like, it's just a different thing. It's a different thing when, like, we're talking about a sitting senator who is advocating a policy that undoubtedly will result in mass murder versus, a kid who you're finding out. Again, I don't mean to be condescending by saying kid, but a 26-year-old streamer. They're just different things, no matter what Nick has said in the past and no matter how big he is now. Like, those are just very different situations. And to even compare the two is like, you had a senator, literally, we all watched it. It was one of the most humiliating things a senator's ever been through. I would take 1,000 fates of McCarthy being censured before one being Ted Cruz, advocating for regime change on the biggest conservative show in the country, and then getting the follow-up question of how many people are in the country and what's the ethnic makeup, and not even being able to ballpark it, not even being able to tell you anything, just pause, and then to fall on the pathetic, oh, it's all the Jews. I mean, look, this seems to be another theme, because let's transition into some of the outrage here. But another theme that it's just so stupid. It's like, I know you're not this stupid to be saying this to me, but when Ted Cruz goes, you're obsessed with Israel, and you go, you said it was your reason for being in your first speech as a senator. There's the idea that we're all obsessed with Israel. Like, I'd say at least for guys like me and you, we've been for a while now opposed to the foreign policy and opposed to the neocons. And we've always known what the neoconservatives' relationship to Israel is. That's never been nobody who was in DC as much as you were doesn't know that, isn't familiar with like the connection between, say, the Likud party and the neoconservatives. And by the way, they all admit this in their own words. This isn't a secret conspiracy, but none of us were like every day making it all about Israel as we were opposing all these wars. We would mention that sometimes. I certainly would mention that. I would mention the clean break strategy. I would mention Tel Aviv's role in all of these wars and how they were encouraging us to fight them. And so I wasn't like running away from it, but it's almost like, I guess my point is that when they say you're obsessed with Israel, it's almost like in 2005, someone telling me, oh my God, you're obsessed with Iraq. And I'm like, no, I'm not obsessed with Iraq. George W. Bush invaded it. So now that's the thing to talk about. Like, Israel has been destroying Gaza. The whole thing is destroyed. They've been doing it for the last 2 years with U.S. funding, support, intelligence sharing, and defense and protection across the globe. So like, no, it's not that we're obsessed about it. It's that You put us in a situation where both political parties are backing this policy that we're against, that is greatly degrading our country. We have to talk about it now. We'd all rather never talk about this again.
Yeah. Well, I'm obsessed with the condition of my own country.
Yeah.
I don't have, another passport, and I'm going to die here as I was born here. And I really care about the fact that it is, by every measure, a less nice country than it was even 10 years ago. So that is my obsession. I mean, if you were to x-ray my brain, you'd find a lot of that. I do think that Israel's leadership under Netanyahu is destroying Israel. I do think that. It's not my primary concern in all this because I'm not Israeli, but I've always liked Israel. I certainly gone there on vacation a lot and always really enjoyed myself. I'm not embarrassed of that. I love Jerusalem. It's not, it's an international city. The Israelis don't own Jerusalem. It's the seat of, right. Okay. So that's my opinion. So I'm not obsessed with Israel. However, reckless and short-sighted political leadership has gotten that country into some very serious trouble, and very serious. Like, I don't see quite how they get out of this. I feel sorry for them, being honest. But I reserve my rage for American leaders. Israel hasn't betrayed me. I'm not Israeli. They try to shut down free speech in the United States. Okay, they think that's to their advantage. I get it. Their prime minister calls for censorship in the United States. Fine. Our leaders go along with it. There's my rage. It's not the Israelis. It's the Americans who are betraying their own country. Like, that's Quisling behavior. That's far worse than Israel acting in what it misconceives as its own interest, if I'm being clear. So it's not Israel I'm obsessed with. It's Ted Cruz I'm a little bit obsessed with. Like, how could you be a senator from one of our most important states and say out loud, my whole purpose for being here is to serve a foreign country? That's it. And this is all so completely out of whack and has been for so long. And the only reason it hasn't corrected is because of bullying and enforced silence. And once the bullying no longer intimidates people, and once you can't enforce silence thanks to the internet, inevitably it was going to collapse. People are going to be called on it. Why are you doing this? How does this help me? Aren't you a senator, congressman, mayor, governor, president from our country? They're going to get that at every turn, and they should get it. Those are fair questions. This was always going to happen. Fuentes didn't do it. I didn't do it. Certainly, you didn't do it. No individual did it. It was just inevitable because the consensus itself was fake. It was totally fake. And now we're getting into what Ben Shapiro used to celebrate, that fabled marketplace of ideas. And he's going to go bankrupt in that marketplace because there's very little support for his position, which is fundamentally lobbying on behalf of a foreign country. And no one wants to do that anymore. Why would they?
Now, one of the things, so I was watching a little bit actually of Ben Shapiro's show today. Liam McCullum, who is a good friend of mine and super, super smart young kid, again, not being condescending, but I'm 42 and he's in his 20s. But he sent me the episode of Ben Shapiro today. So I'm pretty pissed at him for that. That's not a cool thing to do to a friend. But I did watch a little bit of it, and he's going, he's like he's sitting there and he's going like, Tucker Carlson, and then just completely like, in a demented way representing your view. Tucker Carlson, the platforming of Holocaust deniers and this and loving Nazis. The American people hate that. The American people reject that. And meanwhile, there's just this amazing feature about, the new decentralized media landscape where like we can all look at the numbers and we can see who's gaining in relevance and who's losing it. And the fact is that like Nick Fuentes is ascendant. Candace Owens is humongous. She's been breaking records. So that you were the biggest show at cable news, got fired and got bigger after that. But again, you can just look at the numbers. They're all right there. And Ben Shapiro went from being like the king of the online conservative guys to being very much a laughing stock and falling down in all these numbers. So they want to sit here and try to convince you that what you're seeing in front of you isn't really happening. But we all know that it is. And as you said, this whole thing was always such an illusion. There's so many, and this has been, I think, one of the major themes in your Fox News show, and it's continued with you on X and YouTube, that it's like, the truth is that there was never a referendum amongst the American people. Hey, do you guys want to like radically change the nature of this country through massive immigration? Like, it's not like there was ever a vote for that because you never could have gotten that passed. There's never been a referendum on being a world empire. Like,
Exactly.
In fact, I like to make this point all the time, as Ron Paul used to always make this point. The peace candidate almost always wins the presidency. Like if you go through whenever the American people have a chance, all the way back to like even when Woodrow Wilson won the presidency, we're going to keep you out of the war. FDR, we're going to keep you out of the war. Even Lyndon Johnson, when he was at the height of the Vietnam War, how did they beat Barry Goldwater? He's going to drop the bomb. He's going to be the guy who comes in and drops the atom bomb. George W. Bush ran on a humble foreign policy, no nation building, no policing the world. He won on that. Barack Obama ran on ending the wars. He won on that. Donald Trump ran on ending the wars. He won on that. Like the only one you could even say was like Joe Biden beating Donald Trump, but that wasn't really about foreign policy. That was the year of 2020, the chaos in the streets, the lockdowns. People wanted to return to normalcy, or at least some people did. Probably not as many as they say. But the peace candidate always wins. And so you just have the idea that the consensus is that we must break up, we must topple the secular dictator in Syria to install al-Qaeda because that will break up the Shiite crescent and therefore Iran can't get weapons to Lebanon, was like the consensus of the American people. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? What planet do you people live on? It's all fake.
Well, they do live in I mean, I've lived in this world most of my life, so I know the world that they live in, which is a world of self-reference. I mean, it's like there are only 10,000 people in that world. They all know each other or of each other. They make all the decisions. And so they definitely lose track of what everyone else thinks. And one of the great life-changing events for me was moving out of that city and that world and just living in a more normal place, a more normal life. And you realize, wait, that's really crazy. You don't really realize it quite to the extent when you're right next to it. But you're absolutely right. It's totally divorced from what people want. And it hasn't borne fruit. It hasn't worked. That's the other thing. It just doesn't work. It hasn't worked. Tell me how that's worked. And so this moment was always coming. Here's my fear. And it's not about, and I agree with your assessment of Ben, whom I don't hate. I feel sorry for Ben. A man of limited talent who, for whatever reason, became big in a kind of artificial way or filled some vacuum that was later filled by talented people. But Ben is like very afraid. And I think a lot of people, a lot of the neocons and neocon adjacent people believe this stuff. Like they believe that there's like a Fourth Reich on the, I know because I know a lot of them and they text me and like, I can't be, Alex Berenson, who's like a very fragile person, but like a good, nice guy and very smart. And I've like promoted Berenson for, oh my gosh.
Me too.
For real, because I really agreed. I thought he was brave, but at the same time, like a very fearful person, very fearful. And I know a lot of people like this who I really like and have always really liked. And they're texting me like, I can't believe you're a Nazi. Like, I'm going to have to flee the United States. And Ben is like this. Ben fears that he's going to get hurt. And it's like, I look at this and I'm like, I think Ben's fine. It's like, who's more likely to get hurt, me or Ben? It's like not even really close. But that doesn't matter. He feels that way. And a lot of these people who are throwing this Nazi stuff around, they're doing it for a reason. Of course, this is part of a strategy. We got to clear the skeptics out of the Republican Party by the time Trump leaves, or else the neocons will lose their stranglehold on the party. That is the goal. But I just want to say again, as they say these radical, really kind of crazy things, they convince themselves and they become dangerous. I'm just saying that. And also tormented. Yeah. Really unhappy. Like imagine, I talked to, Mark Levin. I talked to him right after Charlie was killed. I called Mark Levin and I called Ben and I said, I don't want to fight at all with you. I'm actually not obsessed with Israel. You clearly are, but I do think we agree on a lot of things and let's not fight. I called them both and I said that. And they were both nice to me about it. Very nice. And then immediately started attacking me again. Whatever, they can't help themselves. But Levin did say something amazing to me. He's like, everyone hates Jews. There are Jew haters everywhere. And I'm fighting the Jew haters. And it's like, I guess if you spend your life on Twitter, you run into a lot of Jew haters, but in real life America, like, no, that's not actually, most people are really nice. And there is no Nazi movement building in America. That's just fake. And but I really think Levin believes that. And I think he had one of these like kind of crazy childhoods with like a screechy mother who just scared the shit out of him every day of his childhood or something like that. Clearly this guy's had a lot of like trauma in his personal life, but it almost doesn't matter the cause. He really believes. He said it to me on the phone, Shapiro too, and a lot of other good people who are not necessarily crazy are convinced that the Fourth Reich is rising. And that's bad for them as people because it torments them and makes them unhappy and alienates their wives and deforms their children, right? It's all bad. But it's also bad for America because panicked, hysterical people are capable of doing, things they wouldn't do if they weren't panicked and hysterical. So we do need to convince everybody the Fourth Reich is not rising. Settle down. I'm not a Nazi. I hate the Nazis. Let me tell you how I hate the Nazis and why. And I have real reasons for feeling that way. It's not just because you're supposed to hate the Nazis. I actually do hate the Nazis for real reasons. But let's just have that conversation. Let's stop. When you stop the conversation, everyone gets completely paranoid and suspicious. That's one of the reasons, main reason I interviewed Fuentes. It's let's just get it out there. If you disagree, tell me how. That's fine. What's wrong with that?
Yeah, 100%. And, I had a post on X the other day about this where it was, I saw it was Dave Rubin and he was talking to Brett Weinstein. And I forget exactly what Brett was saying, but he was saying something about your episode with Fuentes that was reasonable. That was just a reasonable take. Let's not go hysterical about people having conversations with people or something like that. And then Dave Rubin said something like, hey, you could try to be nice to them all you want, but with a last name like Weinstein, they're still going to end up getting you or something. And I was like, guys, this idea that we are on the precipice of another Holocaust, this is not grounded in reality and it's not healthy. It's so destructive because, again, like you said, you just get people to be at their most panicked. That's what we want, people to be making decisions at their absolute most panicked, especially when it's so far removed from reality. And I do.
So hostile. It makes them really, really hostile. And you feel that. I mean, there are a couple of quotes from that Josh Hammer guy who was like, Europeans have hatred or anti-Semitism in their DNA. What? First of all, nobody has hatred in their DNA. People, just to restate, people are not sinful or virtuous by nature of their DNA, period. So, but he believes that. So it does create hate. There's a lot of anti-European, anti-white hostility that grows out of that. If you think people are going to come kill you, you hate them. And I do blame whoever raised Josh Hammer or Dave Rubin, who probably doesn't really, Dave doesn't have much of a soul. I don't know if he actually believes any of this, but there are a lot of actually good people I know. Michael Savage, I've always really liked Michael Savage. He keeps texting me you're a Nazi. It's Michael, it's me, dude. I thought we were friends. And that is so, obviously makes me so sad because I really like Michael Savage. I always have. But beyond my feelings, which are not that relevant, that gets you to hate. That produces hate. Fear produces hate. If you're panicked, if I felt my house was being broken into, I would hate the home invader enough to shoot him without feeling bad about it. Because I feel so threatened.
Right.
It's that principle, but they're making it kind of nationwide and they're really playing with fire, I think.
Yeah, man, do I agree with that? And, I got to say, there is something that's kind of, okay. So I saw this clip, actually a mutual friend of ours, Scott Horton, the great Scott Horton. He sent me this clip of Dinesh D'Souza, and he was in an interview with it was something called the Jewish Channel or something like that on YouTube. And he actually said that, I couldn't believe it. So he was basically, going at you and Candace and how you guys are out of control, conspiracy theorists or whatever. And I just couldn't believe it. He said the quiet part out loud. And I really appreciated this in a way, but he goes, look, we used to have an Irving Kristol and a William F. Buckley, and they would decide who's allowed in and who's not. But now we don't have an Irving Kristol and a William F. Buckley who could decide that Tucker and Candace are out because this is over the line or whatever. And I was just kind of well, hey, at least I swear to God, I messaged him after that and invited him on the podcast because I was like, hey, what a great starting point. You're admitting the part that half of them will deny. So okay, let's talk about this. And one of the things that was interesting to me as Mark Levin is, hysterically calling for your cancellation the other day from this Genocide Fest 2025. And he is, so he's calling for your cancellation, and then he's bragging about all the people that we canceled in the past. And it's kind of interesting because, of course, it does remind me of this famous piece that ran in National Review back in maybe 2004, I want to say it was, called Unpatriotic Conservatives by David Frum.
I'll never forget it.
by the way, and this was a big story that I feel was very underreported, also very personally vindicating for me, that was broken by Ryan Grimm just a few weeks ago, that both Douglas Murray and David Frum, turns out not only has Douglas Murray been to Israel, but he's also been speech writing for their ambassadors, working for the Israeli government. And guess what? David Frum has too. And I'm sorry, but like, as soon as you're coming over and arguing as if you were a journalist or an Canadian American speechwriter for a president, and then you're advocating on behalf of a foreign government, and you do not disclose that you are working for that foreign government. I mean, that is, and by the way, Douglas Murray, if you remember, was lecturing me about journalistic ethics when he's saying you've never been. He said, I have a journalistic practice that if I talk about a place, I've been there, but you don't disclose that you're actually a fucking foreign spy? Okay, Mr. Journalist.
So good.
But
it's
anyway,
so perfect, though. I know.
Look, just for people who don't know this, and I'm sorry for rambling, but for people who don't know this, the unpatriotic conservatives that David Frum, the speechwriter, the guy who coined the term axis of evil, helped launch us on this whole path that we've been on since then, that's wrecked the 21st century. Who were the conservatives who were unpatriotic? It was all the best ones, the best right-wingers in America. It was Pat Buchanan and Ron Paul and Lou Rockwell and Justin Raimondo and Sam Francis and it was all the best guys. None of them were Nazis. None of them were bigots. They just all had one thing in common. They opposed the war party. That was the whole crime that any of them committed.
They were the most patriotic conservatives. And that is the practice of, and I do think there's a spiritual component to this, but of the slanderers now dominating our conversation, it's to invert the truth, not to pull it 3 shades or 15 degrees off. It's to flip it exactly around. No, you're an agent of a foreign country, a foreign power. And it's like, or as Bill Kristol once said to me, said about me, I just, Tucker Carlson is advocating for an ethno-state. I'm like, no, what? No, I think that's what you're doing. But of course, but I always fall for it. It's like, no, I don't have any investors. I have no debt. I have never taken a grant. I've never taken $1 from any foreign government. I literally am not controlled by anybody, which is of course why they hate me. But you're literally advocating on behalf, you're lobbying for, you're in some cases in the employ of taking talking points from a foreign government, and you're accusing me of being an agent of some Russia or Qatar, or both great countries, by the way, I should say. But I've never taken money from them, obviously, and I wouldn't. I'm really focused on America. But the point is, this is such a well-trod point, but I just have to say it again. They accuse you of what they're doing. Every single time. And what is that? That would never occur to me. I would never even think to do that. It's too embracing for me. I couldn't do that.
Dude, Mark Levin literally says Tucker Carlson is engaging in conspiracy theories. And you're like, what is that?
Really,
what is Carlson?
Regularly. But that's the weird thing. And it's like, why? I mean, it's silly. And he's, thank heaven, not very talented or smart or really in trouble, but whatever. But it's so weird. Like, if you wanted to attack me, I could give you the template. I would list my actual faults, which I think are pretty obvious, and I would hit those. I would go with the things that are kind of true. It's like kind of obvious that I'm whatever, can be pompous, or I have a bad temper, or I get kind of fat sometimes, or whatever. That's what I would do, because people would be like, yeah, that seems kind of right. I wouldn't pick exactly what I was doing. It's like, what the hell is that?
Well, you know what? I got to say, kind of on that theme, because there is something interesting about, I mean, look, Mark Levin still commands an audience of dozens and dozens of 95-year-olds. And, I mean, there's still, I'm sure, some people, but it is funny when you see, so both Dinesh D'Souza, who says we used to have an Irving Kristol and a Bill Buckley who could, kick people out. And then
Mark didn't live in this country, you mean? Right.
Yes, that's right. And then
lecturing me about America. Okay.
Right. Yes. And so then you have Mark Levin saying, what do you mean we don't cancel people? We canceled Pat Buchanan. We canceled all these guys and all this. And it's almost like you don't realize, but hey, guys, yes. But the difference between now and then was like the war on terrorism and you guys being completely discredited. That's why it's no longer like that. Like, it's Mark Levin, dude, when he talks about the rise in anti-Semitism and the rise in anti-Israel rhetoric, and then it's almost an implied thing where, like, and everything else was totally normal. I guess Qatar is buying everybody off, but it's like, wait, you're skipping the part where they committed a genocide in 4K and forced me to pay for it. Like, that's the whole, like, if you don't grapple with that, then what are you going to talk about? And look, I just want to read this off because
by the way, meanwhile, as this was happening, the American middle class died.
Right.
And your kids can't buy a house, and the people next door don't speak English, and everything and everyone's on drugs. And so it didn't work. And if you're like, how is this working? How, there's this, well, we need to fight for the soul of conservatism. And I've been a conservative my whole life, like long before Mark Levin was, I can promise you. But I'm not really sure what that means now. Like, what is the goal? Like, what kind of country do you want? That's not something they seem to spend a lot of time thinking about at all.
No, 100%. No, look, during the war on terrorism and through let's say up to now, like the start of the war in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then of course the overthrowing Gaddafi and overthrowing Bashar al-Assad and bombing the crap out of Somalia for 20 years and backing the Saudi invasion in Yemen and then backing the Ukraine war and now backing Israel's destruction of Gaza. Like, during that whole period of time, we've witnessed the largest transfer of wealth from the working and middle class to the elite twice. It happened twice. We set the record in 2008, and then we set it again in COVID. So, like, yes, it's destroyed this country. Now, that's not the only thing that's destroyed the country. There's been lots of other things, but like, while you guys are fighting war after war, no one's paying attention to the country falling apart. And then I got to say this other point too, because specifically on the idea of like canceling you and. And I wanted to, so first I want to make this point, and then I want to, at the end, talk about the kind of implied violence here. But I just wanted to, so Daryl Cooper posted this earlier today, and it was on your theme of like, they accuse you of what they're guilty of. So here's just a few, just at random, of this kind of cast of characters. And of course, we could talk about Ben Shapiro. Wrote when he was about the age that Nick Fuentes was the age when he's been accused of all the horrible things he said, or said some horrible things. Ben Shapiro openly wrote a piece advocating for ethnic cleansing of Palestinians. He also once posted on social media that Jews like to build things and Arabs like to play in mud and blow things up. I think he did apologize for that. This is the reason I hate Ben Shapiro and have hated him for longer than anybody else that's around today. I bet out of all the popular commentators on the internet today, I bet I've hated him the longest. And it was over this. Ben Shapiro said back in 2011, Ron Paul is manifestly evil. As in previous debates, he is now gripping the pen as he would the neck of a Jew. This is what Ben Shapiro said about Dr. Ron Paul, the kindest, gentlest Christian human being that's ever been created, who was right about everything and has never in his life said the Jews. And look, Tucker, I got to tell you, there's a little part of me that almost goes like, hey, you said that about Ron Paul, then you know what, Ben Shapiro? You get Nick Fuentes. I gotta say, there's a part of me that just feels like, okay, now deal with this, man. And now say the exact same thing and watch it fall on deaf ears as it's completely empty. You know, like, and by the way, never apologized for this. I'm sorry, Tucker, I'm going to let you go for a while here.
But you're so right. No. I just, it makes me sad. I mean, because what is that? Like, what actually is that? And it's, of course, hatred. It's hatred toward a group. It's, and people like Ben Shapiro and Josh Hammer and Ted Cruz, all these people, like, they think in terms of groups. And that's what Levin said to me. It's like, my group, people are hurting my group. And it's like, if your group means your family, people you love, I get it. But if you're thinking purely in terms of your ethnic group, which is what he is saying, then you inevitably become very hateful toward other ethnic groups, actually. Yeah. And in Ben's line about Ron Paul, who's like totally committed to nonviolence, by the way, you see that hatred. And so it does, I don't like it. I'll just get right to it. I'm not afraid personally. I mean, I'm not going to talk. I mean, I didn't grow up like in the world that, Seth Dillon grew up in, where you were encouraged to like talk about yourself all the time. Like, narcissism was a true sin in the culture that I grew up in. I never talk about it. I try not to talk about myself in general, but I mean, I know a lot about, people trying to hurt me, been there in a real way, and which I've never talked about, not going to talk about now, but I'll just say I like know what that is. And I know that, people like Seth Dillon or Ben Shapiro, they get a lot out of wearing bulletproof vests and like, oh, I'm so under attack and all this stuff. And it's like, the truth is they are openly pro-violence. So how in the world could you justify killing tens of thousands of children or justify a pager attack, which is an act of terrorism where you indiscriminately blowing people's genitals off? You don't know who's holding the pager, and you're celebrating it. What are you celebrating? You're celebrating violence, and they celebrate violence day after day. That's where their foreign policy comes from. That's what their worldview is. Strangling the neck of a Jew who even thinks that way. Someone who's thinking very often in violent terms, and so and hateful terms. That's hate. And so people like that, when aroused to hysteria, and I feel sorry for them, and I just want to say that again, Lindsey Graham, another violence worshiper, like the idea that they're promoting violence, well, they've been promoting violence for decades because this whole project is about violence. It's about the thrill that they feel killing their enemies, the godlike power they imagine they have when they extinguish human life. That's the whole game for them. And we shouldn't you're not promoting violence? Oh, you're definitely promoting violence. And that's why I oppose you, because I'm opposed to that. We don't have a right to kill people. We do not have a right to kill the innocent, period. Because we're not God. And that's the dividing line between me and Ben Shapiro. And that's why when I said, Hiroshima, of course, I'm for forcing Imperial Japan to stop doing what it's doing, make them apologize. I'm for beating them. I am. But I'm not for incinerating tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of their civilians, because the civilians didn't do anything wrong. And I don't think we're allowed to kill the innocent. So I say that on Rogan. And Ben Shapiro's like, Holocaust denier, or whatever, something, one of these meaningless phrases that mean Nazi, bad person. And it's like, why would that bother you? Why are you so offended that I'm opposed to killing innocents? And of course, the answer is because your whole worldview and the whole purpose of your life is to justify killing innocents. And clearly the joy in your life derives from killing innocents. And so that's who we're dealing with here. Okay. Like Lindsey Graham literally said the other night, he's like, we're killing the right people. Man, imagine what it's going to be like standing at the end, at the judgment, because there is a judgment, period. And like you were celebrating killing the right people. Like, oh, I wouldn't want to be that man. And I mean it. I'm not trying to be self-righteous. Like, I'll have to answer for a lot of shit, but I hope I'll never have to answer for taking glee in the killing of human beings. Like, we're not allowed. Check yourself.
No, that's right. And, in some ways, there's a lot of overlap between, in my eyes at least, between kind of the fundamental Christian insight there and the fundamental libertarian insight, which I guess would come after that, after God, but it's almost like something you logically deduce after you have that morality. But there's the idea that, you could almost say it's illegal to commit acts of violence or incite acts of violence unless the government's doing it, in which case you can incite and advocate for all the violence you want to. But the fundamental libertarian insight would be that morally speaking, that's the same thing. Like, just because a government did it, it is no different than a private actor doing it. And that you can, if you believe in morality, then obviously we can't create another class and say, well, I call you senator, and so now if you kill people, it's collateral damage. We wouldn't accept that from a private person, and so we can't accept that from a public person. But this is, I'm not, as I'm saying in just Genocide Fest 2025 here, that they had the other day, the whole thing was genocidal in tone. There was, what's that guy? Brandon Tatum, who I debated once on Piers Morgan, who I don't hate him, but he might be the dumbest person who's ever talked about politics in the history of the world. And he's up there and he's saying, turn Gaza into a parking lot. True, if I was prime minister, I'd have done it in 48 hours. Like, I'm sorry, people aren't allowed to leave Gaza. If you're saying turn it into a parking lot, you're advocating murdering 1 million children. Like, what? You just casually drop. Then Lindsey Graham is bragging that Trump ran out of bombs, all the people that we're killing. Then, you know, like more, like all of them. It's like, and then you think at the end of that, you still have the moral authority to say cancel Nick Fuentes or cancel Tucker Carlson? No, screw you. Like,
Well,
who do you think you are?
If you think, I mean, Randy Fine made his money in the gambling industry. Okay. Why not porn?
Yeah, right.
You know, the biggest donor to the party made money in the gambling industry. I mean, it's all just so gross, and it cannot withstand sunlight for one moment.
That's right.
And if the idea is that the future of the Republican Party is Randy Fine and Ted Cruz, this kind of quivering weirdo, I feel sorry for Ted, but like, really, Ted Cruz? Like, let's, you know, what kind of scrutiny could that withstand? Not much. And et cetera, et cetera. Lindsey Graham, the whole thing. And again, I don't want to be mean. I'm trying not to be mean. But if that's the future of the Republican Party, okay, you know, good luck. But that's not. Then there'll be another party that will represent the majority of Americans who just want really simple things like sovereignty, a government that cares about them, that does something, however imperfectly, to improve their lives. Like, these are not ideological questions. These are just human questions. And if you have a party run by people who don't care about that at all, it's doomed to be a boutique party, for real. So, like, I actually think long term, it's better to get this all out now. I do hope that they can slow down with the appeals to violence, neutralizing people, murdering people.
Yeah.
Me in this case, but and I'm not whining about it because I'm not Seth Dillon. Like, oh, I'm under attack. Obviously, I'm under attack. I don't need to prove that, and I'm not afraid at all. And I mean that. You can tell I'm not afraid. But I hope we can tone that down because it's clearly a sign of like national decline when people start talking like that.
Yeah.
But I just do think ultimately, I don't know who's going to win, but it's not going to be though. It's not going to be Lindsey Graham. It's not going to be Randy Fine. That guy. Imagine being his psychiatrist. By the way, we should hold their mothers to account. Like, who raised Randy Fine? You know what I mean? What were their mothers like? I mean, I'm not to be Freud about it, but like, really. But anyway, those people are not the future at all. That's why they're hysterical. So I'm just glad this is coming out now. Like, the more we can just open it up and like talk honestly about what we think and the clash of worldviews. There's a clash of worldviews, period. And those people don't want to be in a coalition with people who care about America. That's fine. Yeah. You know, it was never meant to be then. Then we should, you know, it's a starter marriage. Let's get divorced. Right?
No, 100%. And I think that it is important in this moment almost to like you said, look, I just want to say real quick on the Josh Hammer thing, because it's just, I'm never one of the people who goes like, oh, like if you have some like harsh rhetoric, then I'm saying you're inciting violence or something. I'm very hyperbolic myself, and I call people I call people war criminals and blood-soaked monsters all the time. But I'm sorry, almost everyone, including Josh Hammer, all of the people who are, by the way, one of their big arguments is that Candace is out of way out of line to be asking all of these questions about what really happened with Charlie Kirk or speculating about what was going on. And that obviously what it was, we all know it was a leftist and nobody else can ask any questions like that. It was a leftist who did this. And their whole argument is that it was the rhetoric over these years of calling him a Nazi over and over again that led to this. They've just been making that argument. And then in a piece that Josh Hammer is writing about Charlie Kirk and what he would think of you sitting down with Nick Fuentes, his final line is that the fox is in the henhouse and it must be neutralized. Like, come on, I'm sorry. Every single one of those guys on that stage, if Nick Fuentes had come on your show and the last thing he said about Jews before the episode cuts off was the fox is in the henhouse and it must be neutralized. Are you telling me that all these guys wouldn't call that out for what it obviously is? Like,
I agree.
I mean, and so, but I think,
but it doesn't work. It doesn't work. I mean, I want to talk about myself for, making it about me because it's not about me. It's about the future of the Trump movement after Trump. That's what all this is about. I'm just happened to be in this place. I'm not trying to shirk responsibility for anything I did at all, but it's not really about me. They're mad at me because I'm like basically sincerely a moderate guy. I'm against violence. I don't
I
like
think
radical change. That's why they hate me. But
yes.
leaving aside me, that doesn't work, because at least with me, I'm not afraid of Josh Hammer. My soul is at peace. If Josh Hammer killed me right now, I'd be like, okay. So the ideas go away? Am I going to hell? No, I feel truly at peace. I'm not afraid at all. And I really mean that. I'm not challenging someone to try to make another assassination attempt against me. I'm just saying it doesn't have its intended effect. Bullying only works if the person being bullied is afraid of getting hit in the face, but you occasionally run into someone who's not. And we have now a bunch of people who aren't afraid. So they're going to have to do what all of us should be required to do, which is to make your case. Tell us why you think that. Submit to some questions, like, not hostile questions, but just like sincere questions. Like, if AIPAC's not a foreign lobby, what is it? Shut up, anti-Semite. I mean, their kind of rhetorical muscles are so flabby right now from underuse. They've never had to defend what they do. They've had a huge effect on the way the government works. I've seen it over, firsthand for decades. Like, anybody who doesn't agree is just prevented from joining the conversation. There are 535 members of Congress, House and Senate. How many are openly skeptical of our relationship with Israel? A couple out of 535? How did that happen? So all their effectiveness has all been sub rosa. It's all been hidden from public view. None of these people have had to make an affirmative case for what they believe. And now they do. Okay, welcome to my world. I have to defend what I say. That's good for me. It makes me stronger, more confident, less hysterical, less fragile. I encourage my children to live the same way. Be open. And if you're doing something wrong, people will tell you. You can defend it. If you can't defend it, you should probably agree with them and stop doing it, right? This is just like life. But they've never had to live like that, because it was always like, shut up, Nazi. And it's just, that doesn't work anymore.
That's right. And with what you were saying before, with the kind of paranoia, it also comes this inability to self-reflect, because things become so knee-jerk. Like, I just can't imagine a situation. Like, I suppose I could try to imagine a situation where, like, let's say I had to defend a policy that killed about 100,000 innocent people. And, like, maybe I could think of a scenario in my mind, like, I really believed that if we didn't do this, 500,000 innocent people would die. And so, oh my God, this is horrible. But, like, I think this thing where 100,000 people die is better than this thing where 500. Okay, let's just say hypothetically I could ever get there in my mind. If people were furious at me for that, I wouldn't be like, you must be a hater, and that's why you're furious. I'd be like, okay, no, well, look, I get it. I get why you think this is so horrible that we have to do this. But let me at least explain to you why it's absolutely, like, there's not a shred of that. And I do, look, in this time, I think, like, you've really done a good job of laying this out. And I want to firmly be clear that I'm, like, in your camp with this too, where, look, if I'm full disclosure, I am a bit of a radical libertarian. Like, I really genuinely believe we should have no income tax and no central bank and no economic policy and I'd abolish every department and every three-letter agency.
I see your point. I just want to say,
sure,
I am not a libertarian, but I do like the sound of what you're saying. So,
look, this is my, I'm against the welfare state. I'm against the warfare state. And if you look at the actual federal government, that's about 99% of it. So I'm just saying, I am kind of radical in my libertarian, but I am totally willing to settle at this point for just, like, the most, like, what I'm actually asking for, which I don't think is very radical, is like, hey, let's not have permanent militarism and forever wars of choice. Let's not have an open border, and let's not destroy our currency and drive off a cliff with debt. Exactly. Like, there's nothing radical about that. And we're also both saying we are clearly in the camp here who is like, we don't hate Jews, we don't hate blacks, we don't hate whites, we reject wokeism and hating Jews and hating blacks, all for the same reason, because it's all dumb collectivist nonsense. But we're against wars that kill innocent people, that are wars of choice, that hurt our country. And they can try all they want to pretend that camp doesn't exist, but that is the dominant camp at this point on both the left and the right. Like, that's the dominant one.
Yes, but that way of thinking, which is increasingly common, and I just want to say for the fifth time, is the threat to Western civilization. Is that kind of thinking that places ethnic interests above the individual, and assigns guilt or virtue on the basis of blood, that leads to genocide. It led the Nazis to do it. It led the Israeli government to do it. It led the Hutus to do it in Rwanda in 1994. It always leads to the same place. If you think that your opponents are not quite human, then you have less compunction about killing them. So I just think it's so important to have that debate right there. If you think that you are somehow morally better, if God favors you more than he favors someone you dislike, then you don't have a problem killing that person, or less of a problem than the rest of us do, who feel like God judges all people as people. Okay, that's the first thing. Second thing I would say, it's going to be hard to. Why do people take sides in a debate like this, in this kind of beehive moment where all of a sudden there's just like a swarm of bees stinging you and like it's coming from every direction and all of a sudden you're being denounced? It's happened to me 100 times in my life. This is the most intense I've ever seen. But you do see this breakdown of some people are like, no, I'm not, I'm just going to stick to what I know is true. And then a whole other group of people, some of whom you know really well, who are joining in the new thing and denouncing the new monster, like today's Hitler happened to be me, but it was a lot of, it's been a lot of people. There's always a certain sort of person who joins in that. And I've thought a lot about it because I know so many, I've been denounced by so many people I like and have helped over the years. They're all weak. That is the truth. They're all weak. Either they're in some impossible position politically or financially or sexually, or they're just weak inside. And I feel so sorry for them because they know that they're violating their principles, that, guys like Dinesh D'Souza or Eric Metaxas, who I really liked and helped. And by the way, Eric Metaxas just was like calling me a Nazi for interviewing Nick Fuentes. Eric Metaxas wrote a book about one of my heroes, Martin Luther, the German monk, Martin Luther, not the the fake Christian civil rights guy, but Martin Luther 500 years ago created Protestantism, really one of my heroes in life. But Martin Luther, man, kind of went bonkers on the Jewish question, became like an actual anti-Semite in the last few years of his life, and including, famously wrote a book called, and I'm quoting, "On the Jews and Their Lies." Oof. I reject that, just for the record.
It's a grabby title. I'll give him that.
It's a grabby title. But Eric Metaxas wrote a whole book about how great Martin Luther was, which I agreed with. But right. Martin Luther also wrote an anti-Semitic treatise called "On the Jews and Their Lies." But so that's fine. Okay.
Martin Luther was woke right.
He was woke right, like for real. But Metaxas writes this whole book. But then I interview Nick Fuentes and tell Nick Fuentes I'm against anti-Semitism, which I sincerely am. And like, I'm the criminal, but you just wrote the book glazing a guy who wrote "On the Jews and Their Lies." It's like, what is that? It's nothing to do with principle. It's that this is someone who's weak in a precarious position, and he's being used by, the more powerful to do their bidding. And imagine being that guy. Imagine being the guy who does something is not right, violates his own principles because you're under all that pressure. You're Winston Smith at the end of 1984. You've been really shown your greatest fear, and then you've been forced to say that 2 + 2 = 5. Like, imagine the self-hatred, the hollowness, the total lack of dignity. I feel sorry for those guys. I would rather die than do that. And I mean that.
Yeah. Oh, I could not agree with you more on that. I mean, yeah, it's kind of like, it's almost, and this is kind of my own experience of like, I grew up without a father who was present in my life, and I had years of being angry at him. And now I got these like beautiful little grandkids, and I just think to myself, I go, oh my God, like what could be a worse punishment than that he's never met that he's not in their life? Like what a horrible, sad thing to be. It's like the appropriate reaction isn't even to be angry about it. It's to be like, geez, thank God I didn't mess up that bad that I found myself in that situation in life. Right. And, I guess kind of the real thing going forward, right, is that it does, like I said, obviously this was like a weird, pathetic last gasp of this old guard who's lost complete control of the conversation that they once really gate kept the parameters very effectively of. Like however we feel about it, David Frum in the short term won, and Pat Buchanan, Ron Paul, and Sam Francis and Raimondo, they lost in the short term. But now Like, hey, Dinesh, as you said, that's right. You don't have an Irving Kristol anymore. You don't have a William F. Buckley anymore. Okay. You don't have now. There's a different world, and they're not going to be able to silence this conversation. It seems to me, it's like, look, it's already been clear after everybody pretended that Daryl Cooper denied the Holocaust on your show, even though he clearly didn't, and has explained a million times that he didn't. If anyone wants to go back, by the way, this topic came up on my last interview on this channel with Daryl Cooper from a week or two ago, and where he was, anyway, it's just obviously was all made up. Daryl Cooper said nothing like that, and he's doing a World War II series right now. I highly recommend people check that out in the Martyr Made podcast. But there is Substack, after all that, they weren't dropping him. No. Elon Musk is not going to kick off the biggest conservative voice, Tucker Carlson, in America. In fact, just think about how crazy the demand is here. Josh Hammer is demanding that the most popular conservative show host get neutralized. Who are you, dude? How are you going to do that? You're going to get Twitter, and then you got to take care of Rumble, because if they start doing it on YouTube and Facebook again, we're all just going to go to Rumble, and the people are getting millions of views over there. You guys don't get to control the conversation anymore. Like you said, I think you said it perfectly. You actually have to defend your position. And the problem with that is that if your whole thing is based off death and lies, that has a tendency of getting exposed. And I'll give the final word to you, because I've kept you over the time.
Thank you. No, I'm really grateful for this. What is the future going forward? Clearly, this is a huge change. Like, nothing like this has ever happened in right-wing, libertarian, conservative, whatever this is on the right politically. And this is a break. And I would just say two things. One, clearly this coalition can't hold together, obviously. But the core idea of MAGA, which is America first, it's a really simple concept. The U.S. government should really make a good faith effort to put the interests of U.S. citizens first. That's it. That's the whole idea right there. It's not a dangerous idea. It's not a Nazi idea. It's really the only idea in a democracy. That idea is the most popular idea ever introduced into American politics. It died in 1941 with Pearl Harbor. And everyone who espoused it, starting with Lincoln, was slandered as a Nazi. And it lay dormant until 2015, when Donald Trump reintroduced it on his ride down the escalator. And he rode that idea to 2 wins, including the popular vote. And he's Donald Trump. So he's like working, as we say in wrestling, off his back, like with the deficit, right? Because he's alienating people on other issues. So that is the most resonant idea ever in American politics. That idea can create a coalition that includes a lot of people. We can have a good faith argument over what is best for America. That should be the argument. But most people would not argue with the intent, which is to help American citizens. So you could create a much bigger coalition with a ton of disaffected Democrats. Some are hardened and they're vested in the system, and they're getting a lot out of identity politics and machine politics, and they're never going to leave. But there are a ton of Democratic voters who will join you in that. And you saw glimpses of that in the last election, where a lot of black voters, traditionally Democrats, voted for Trump. Why? America first. That's why. And so you can make the coalition a dominant generational coalition very easily if you stick with that idea. That's the first thing. The second thing is, you should be forgiving always. Things are being said right now that almost seem like they can't be forgiven. They're exhortations to violence. Clearly they are, et cetera, et cetera. Slander of a kind that's so severe. Like, how do you get past that? I think we should force ourselves. I interviewed Nick Fuentes to attack my wife and my son and my dad. He can't attack my dad. And I interviewed him anyway. I choked it back, and I thought to myself, I want to hear this, and I'm just going to I try to make myself do that. So if tomorrow John Podhoretz is like, or whomever I'm mad at, right? People I used to know are calling me a Nazi, is like, you know what? I don't think he's actually a Nazi. Like, let's have a real conversation. Let's do the best for America. They should all be accepted. I don't think we should have permanent enemies who are American citizens. I don't, because I think the whole idea of it is we're united by citizenship, our common Americanness. Everybody's welcome, even if we hated each other 20 minutes ago. And Glenn Greenwald, I hated Glenn Greenwald. Now I think he was one of my favorite people in the world, not just politically, but personally. Like, forgiveness is essential. People change. Allow for that. Don't draw permanent lines in the sand where it's like, I hate you and I will hate your son too. Like that's non-Western thinking. We don't allow that.
Okay, I know I said that was you would have the last word, but I just got to say, because that just actually really inspired me. That is like really so important, so beautiful. So, and I'm going to actually try to live that a little bit right now, because you had mentioned earlier in the show, and I was even thinking about it when you mentioned it, like Alex Berenson, who like I've been a bit upset about because I think he was, pretty shitty to me. But even as you say it, Alex Berenson got one of the most important issues that ever faced this country completely right, and he got it right when it mattered the most, and when it took the most courage to do it. And I will say this about him: you'll always have that. No one could ever take that away from you. Not everybody has an example of a story like that. So I'll show a little bit of grace there. And then just one more quick thing before, and then we can wrap up. But because just thinking about this, it does seem, and maybe this is even one area where I would almost agree a little bit with the spirit of what some of the people who are so upset with me and so upset with you, really upset with you, have been saying, is that they say, hey, there's a real danger here that this could crack up the coalition, and then the Democrats, who seem to be, just the most unpopular political party in many centuries right now, then this is the thing that could give them a path back. And I will say, hey, we agree. I think there's a real danger about that. I saw what Joe Biden tried, not Joe Biden, but, I saw what the progressive Democrats tried to do when they had Joe Biden in there. They tried to pass a ministry of truth. They tried to get that OSHA bill to regulate every midsize and large company in the country and force them to get the jab. Luckily, like the court struck that down, but the all types of tech censorship, yeah, who knows? If they come back the next time, they might be really hunting for blood now after these rollbacks. But then, of course, the question is like, but who's breaking up the coalition here? And why do you just get to look at it as like, we're breaking up the coalition rather than you, when clearly our obvious demand here is just that we do what's in the best interest of this country. But they accuse you of that. Look, despite all the stuff with the 12-day war, we'll see what ends up happening with that. Despite your feelings on this posturing toward Venezuela, despite your feelings about us backing Israel in this war, you've never said, I'm done with Donald Trump, I'm walking away from this whole thing. I mean, I kind of did, but I'm just saying, it's like, who's really breaking up the coalition here? Because the truth is that you are in this battle of like the donor and powerful class versus all of the people. And if JD Vance wants to go forward, we still do have this pesky little democratic process here, Tucker, and he needs the people. Or whoever's going to do it needs the people. And the only way to carry that is to, like, the non-interventionist right at this point is not some fringe group. It's the overwhelming majority. Like the rejection of the neocons and the forever wars and the America First thing, like you said, is that so the only reasonable thing to keep the coalition together is to get on board with America First. I don't think that's an unreasonable demand, and that doesn't mean get on board with any type of bigotry or Nazism or anything like that. Just all the stuff me and you have been talking about here today. This country comes first. And I say this, I'm Jewish, but you know what? I'm an American. My kids live in America, and my kids are more important to me than any abstract idea. This is the country they're going to grow up in. And so anyway, okay, I promise I won't say another thing after that.
Your country comes before your tribe, no matter what tribe it is, including mine. I'm not, any tribe, okay? Tribalism leads to genocide every single time. We can't have that. The only way to preserve the United States, this vast, country in which there's no working majority of anything, is to emphasize citizenship, our common Americanness, country before tribe. And the overwhelming majority of Americans want that and can accept it. And anyone who can't accept it can have their own political party, which will not get a majority of anything ever. It's just kind of that simple. And I'm just grateful that we can have this conversation openly for the first time.
Yeah. Me too. Well, Tucker, thank you so much for coming on this show to talk about this stuff. I just always really love talking about you, and I always love talking to you. I always love watching you, and so this was really great for me. And thank you to everybody else for watching. All right, we'll catch you next time. Later.